Well, good day, everyone. Welcome back to Digital Ag Global. I'm your host, Clyde Graham of Keystone Solutions. And today we have an exciting and very important discussion lined up regarding agricultural technology in Africa. As always, we've got Yuri Kovalchuk, President and CEO of Cultivate, an AgTech software development company, who's going to provide his perspectives. And then we have three guests today that are going to provide their perspectives on AgTech business opportunities in Africa. This topic is very personally important to me. Before I left Fertilizer Canada, where I worked for many years, I had a 5-year project in Africa where we were assisting about 80,000 smallholder farmers in Senegal, Ethiopia, and Ghana to improve their use of fertilizer and have better outcomes. So I have a strong interest in Africa, and I do believe that ag tech is an important part of the modernization and commercialization of agriculture in Africa. So Yuri, why don't you start, maybe provide your perspectives, and then we'll have our guests introduce themselves.
Sure. Thank you, Clyde. Guys, as you already know, my name is Yuri Kovalchuk. I'm CEO and co-founder of Cultivate. We are an AgTech software development company, and we are helping businesses from agri-food value chain to create digital innovations. We are hosting this podcast to put together a network, a community of people who are caring about AgTech and innovation in agriculture. And today we're gonna have a bit of a geographical focus, and we're gonna talk a bit more about African AgTech, some unique traits of innovations in Africa, and what it takes to grow AgTech business in this continent, and what are the challenges, trends, and opportunities are there. Before we jump into introducing our three guests, we have a great lineup today. I will just mention that Digital Ag Global has a sponsorship packages available. So if you're feeling that you're ready to become a part of a network, have access to future topics, our community, and all the insights we gather, feel free to drop us a line, and we'll get you onboarded. With this said, let's start introducing our guests. We're gonna have a very interesting, fruitful discussions. We bring people from a different aspects of AgTech together, and we'll see how they give us some insights on what does it take to run AgTech company in Africa.
All right, so let's turn to Folu Okunade from Hello Tractor. It's one of the most innovative companies that I've seen in the mechanization center. And maybe, Folu, you could just talk a little bit about yourself and your company's adventures in Africa.
Sure, thanks, Clyde. So my name is Folu Okunade. I'm the CEO at Hello Tractor. Hello Tractor is an agriculture technology company that really exists to connect smallholder farmers with equipment, primarily tractors for mechanization. Been in the market 7th year. We started in Nigeria, and now the technology is available in about 20 countries in Africa. We've got over 2 million farmers that we're mechanizing. 1 million acres that we've mechanized across Africa, and still a lot of work left to go.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Folu. That's great. We're really interested in hearing your views. And then Jerry Oche. Jerry, you're in Nigeria, I understand, and you're the CEO at Zowasel. Maybe you could talk a little bit about your supply chain innovations at your company.
Jerry, you're on mute.
Yeah, so thanks, Clyde. So my name is Jerry Oche. Here at Zowasel. Basically, we're essentially a commodity marketplace. We provide access to market to cooperatives and also startups who want to work with farmers and want to connect with the market. We work with a lot of big corporates across Nigeria, Kenya, and Tanzania who are sourcing commodity, both conventional and sustainable commodity. So what we do is to provide a platform for farmers through their cooperative and other agribusinesses to connect to these big these big markets. At the same time, we introduced trade finance just over 2 years. Last year, we did disburse over $4 million in transaction in Nigeria. This year, we extended that to Tanzania, where we are working with a couple of farmers across the sorghum and barley value chain. So essentially, we're a commodity marketplace trying to connect farmers through their cooperative to global markets. We do work with farmers mainly across Africa, but some of the corporates we work with typically across Europe and Asia, particularly around Japan, around Switzerland, Germany, Belgium, and other places. So that's all.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jerry. And then we're going to zip back to Nairobi with Tom Vranken, Director of Innovations at SunCulture. Tom, maybe you can give us an overview on your company and what you're doing in Africa.
Sure, Ken, Clyde. Thanks for having us. So like Clyde said, I'm Tom. I run innovations at SunCulture. And at SunCulture, we design and sell solar-powered irrigation systems, and we finance those on credit. So our primary customer base are smallholder farmers, whom we sell to, I think, 55,000 of them. And we sell irrigation kits that supply farms with a size from 1 to 3 acres with everything they need, everything our customers need to grow sort of an irrigated style of farming. We do that on credit. So we've developed our proprietary IoT-enabled credit management system, which allows us to remotely monitor our systems while they're being deployed. And I think it's an interesting topic to speak of AgTech, and thanks guys for taking it so broadly, because I think there's a lot of different things that we're innovating on in the space. So very excited to be here.
All right. Well, that's great. Before we go to the next, the first topic, I just want to remind the audience that if you have any questions or comments, please type them into the chat, and we'll have our guests address them as best we can during the session. If we don't get comments from you, we don't have as much of an interactive session, and we'd really like to know what's on your minds when you're obviously you're interested in both AgTech and Africa for this session. So please don't be shy. All right, so Folu, maybe we can start with the first topic. I think we really want to get into the idea of the challenges and opportunities. But before we do that, I'd like to have all our guests give their perspective on how you view the marketplace in Africa for the kinds of products and services you're providing. And I'm well aware that there are 54 countries in Africa, many kinds of geographic and political systems that everyone's dealing with. And it's certainly not just one market, it's many markets. So Flu, but maybe you could provide your perspectives on what it's like doing AgTech in Africa these days.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an evolving marketplace. It's one that is not for the thin-skinned. I think. I think my co-entrepreneurs on this panel can attest to that. One of the key constant things are always changing. And you've got to be flexible enough to kind of adapt to the changes. A little bit about actually Tom and Jerry talked about a little bit about providing credit to smallholder farmers. The cost of financing in Africa is one of the key barriers, and then one of those inputs that are very costly. Countries in some continue to get even costlier. I remember last year we were providing some credit in terms of asset financing for our customers. And we had to halt a facility that we had, one of the largest equipment financing facilities in Kenya, because of the high cost of capital that we simply pass along to customers, like you can in other industries, for example, more mature industries. So that obviously has ripple effects on our top line and our projections and our plans. So you've kind of got to move and evolve as things evolve as well. So I think but that also creates opportunities to innovate. And I think the truly innovative companies, the ones that are flexible to reinvent themselves and really follow the customers, are the ones that ultimately end up surviving. But it's I think we'll get challenges and the opportunities later, but it's one that requires flexibility and a lot of innovation. A team that's willing to move.
All right. Well, thanks, Folu. Those are important points, and I think the theme of financing is going to continue to be something that's going to be discussed in the days ahead in Africa. Creating a better financial opportunity and systems and de-risking are all going to be important issues. So, Tom, maybe we'll zip over to you. Maybe you could talk just a little bit about how you see the landscape from a marketplace point of view.
Yeah, no, and to piggyback on Folu, I think the challenge seems like enormous, right? Because we're in a way also solving an infrastructure problem, especially for us. Like we serve customers who are off grid, both from an electricity as well as from a water point of view, without and a customer base who is typically unbanked. So I think that challenge means that you have to do everything and you have to innovate in everything. And I think talking about opportunities, innovation, I think we also can talk about pride. I think all of us here, we're figuring out something that is a technology that's inherently not sort of status quo in the rest of the world, whether that's decentralized power solutions or P2P equipment interfacing. But the challenge itself is quite big, and I think the financing plays a part of it. But in a large setting, you can see it as an infrastructure question as well. With sort of the banking system is not ready yet to give a financing at a cost that is for us sustainable. So we need to innovate there, but also when it comes to the larger infrastructure, such as the water and electricity grid, as well as the digital infrastructure, which we'll maybe touch on later as well.
Yeah. No shortage of opportunities to meet challenges in Africa these days. Jerry, maybe we could have your perspective on the marketplace. Yeah, I think, Jerry, we're having trouble hearing you there. Perhaps you're muted.
Yeah, I think
that we can hear you now.
Africa is very unique. It's better as emerging markets. So a lot of opportunities and also a lot of challenges. This is typically expected for emerging markets. What we've seen is also when it comes to use cases in Nigeria, for example. Now the cost of lending is far higher than you have in places like Kenya or Tanzania, for example. That also comes with a lot of challenges, right? So it's not one. It's not one jacket fit all. So you need to innovate based on based on each country, based on each locality. In Tanzania, for example, we experience a total. I wouldn't say cultural shock, but I'll say maybe business shock in terms of how business is done compared to Nigeria and Kenya, which are pretty much, if you like, a little bit more direct compared to Tanzania, which is more of a socialist state. If you look at that in that sense, so that's different across the continent. Like you mentioned, it's one big market, but it's also segmented markets, different regulations, different opportunity. So for us, being that we provide a platform to connect cooperative merchant to the big markets, also provide trade finance for that kind of commodity. So we in our case, it's quite a little bit different because we don't give money in anticipation of someone will go and get the commodity. We provide the financing on top of the commodity that you can't wait for the big corporate to pay within 30 days or 60 days. So we provide a bridge financing within that period of time. Because what we realize also is across the continent, once we talk about access to markets, is a little bit confusing because farmers seem to be able to sell their commodity in their local communities. whether it's local market or through a local agent. But what they lack is able to connect to the big corporates. This is because, again, the big corporates don't make cash payments. They make payment after some cycle of days or week or months. So we come in to provide that to enable them to connect to the big market. So if you look at what we do, you see that so the cost of lending here in Nigeria is quite different from our operations in Tanzania. The processes are different. So again, it's also learning for us in terms of regulation, in terms of how we're able to channel our platform and how we're able to interact with our farmers and corporates in the market. It's quite different from what we assume that it should be maybe what is obtainable in Nigeria or Kenya, which are very similar market in terms of so many things, but in Tanzania it's quite direct opposite. So it's an interesting journey for us, and also lots of opportunities and also lots of challenges.
Right. Well, I think one thing that I find interesting is that, in many parts of the world, if you're producing a widget, you just sell your widget and everybody figures everything else. But you have to provide, what I'm hearing is that you have to provide a full range of supports in order to sell your widget or your services that you're providing. It's a very different model than in many other parts of the world. And, I admire you taking this on. Yuri, from your perspective outside of Africa, coming from Ukraine, what's your view?
I mean, guys mentioned a lot of stuff that I've been hearing from some of potential clients we've talked to in Africa, and we've talked to companies from Kenya, Nigeria, Tanzania, Rwanda, and I would say the biggest part of in AgTech innovations would fall into those three categories: either market access, so different type of marketplaces connecting smallholder farmers to sell to cooperatives or to big outgrowers. The second big kind of type of innovations would be around ag fintech, so either loan programs or some sort of pay-as-you-go, buy now, pay later stuff, everything around affordable finances, so to say. And the third one would be around, I would summarize it as an insights provider. So ability to provide farmer with some sort of insights on his crops, on his farm practices, or on his inputs, or everything related to his operation. So from what I've seen, those are three main types of AgTech startups you can find in Africa. And of course, Africa is a big continent, a lot of different countries, a lot of different perspectives, but if I would need to generalize, that's how I would do it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks a lot. Again, let me remind the audience, please, we're really keen to see your perspectives, what questions you have for the guests, and also any comments you'd like to make. Just a reminder there. So, I think some of the challenges I've been hearing about from you today are financing, infrastructure, and sort of some of the market, issues that occur in Africa. What are your priorities, and where do you think that support in terms of infrastructure, financing, et cetera, are going to come from? Are your companies going to have to provide all of that, or do you think there's some solutions that will happen through the advancement of an African market, or there's a free trade agreement in Africa now? There's talk about more investment in Africa from outside the continent. Where are those solutions going to come from? Do they have to be brought up by entrepreneurs themselves, or is there other kinds of support that's going to come into the region? Why don't we start with you, Tom?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think and you can see traction on this as well. I think the World Bank with the Mission 300 program, I think it's a good one. It's a very, it still keeps sort of the pressure on us to do product market finding, but make sure we can do that in a more conducive environment through the subsidy program that they offer. And I think we all understand, maybe not in the day to day, but I think partnerships across the different AgTech companies will help us to get out of the mode of like doing everything ourselves. So I think there's already a lot of partnerships happening. Maybe they come and go with the economy and the stress that's applied to us. So hopefully we'll get into smoother water soon, and then we can kickstart those collaborations again. But I think anything related to subsidy financing coming from like multi-country actors is a good one. The other one that we're highly supportive of is the carbon credit marketplace, as well as the increased diligence and transparency that's happening there. I think it's a very good, it's an imperfect, but maybe the best vehicle that we have of subsidizing renewable energy solutions in countries that need it to be subsidized, and then those costs transfer to the companies countries that have been able to benefit from cheap energy across decades.
Yeah. Folu, maybe you could provide your views on that.
Yeah, I think offered a point of view. So I don't. I like the idea of partnerships. I think that's really the key to unlocking some of these. I'm glad you didn't start with me, because I was going to say I was born in Nigeria, and I've been a student of Africa even before I started kind of working in Africa. And you've seen a lot of good plans come and get really excited about it, and then our administration is going at any given point. I think for us as Hello Tractor, we've learned the art of at least showing some traction, even in a small scale, for what we expect to see happen, while we engage with the multi-state actors like the World Bank, like the IFC, and local and federal governments as well. And we've seen some success in kind of proving, getting a POC together, showing some, and others coming on top of that to provide the necessary subsidies and enabling environments and things like that. I think ultimately your question is sort of a leading question, Clyde, in that it's really the government and the multi-state actors that have the financial kind of heft to be able to scale that it needs to move. The innovations around AgTech and getting smallholder farmers to a force that actually not just live in a subsistence perspective, but also grow in a way that they can export and really meaningfully impact the GDP of the countries. That's going to take a different partnerships at probably a much bigger scale than we can. But what we can do from our part is to show a use case, show some traction, bring along our partners in the international development and within the government spaces, and hope we can create some of the policies that we see in places like India and Brazil and Europe and America to build economies that we operate in.
Yeah, excellent points, Jerry. What do you see from your line of sight?
Yeah, so I think from my own perspective, I think it's also good to understand that that's probably how we try to use technology. Technology alone cannot transform African agricultural value chain. One of the key things missing is also infrastructure. So we don't have infrastructure in place, which I think is for us is a critical ingredient in transforming the agricultural value chain. I think in terms of financing also, it's not what commercial credits can do. We need patient capital. For us at Zowasel, in the Nigerian business, we've secured a kind of a partnership with the central bank subsidiary, who provides credit guarantee to show that all the money given to the platform is kind of a guarantee against possible defaults and all of that. So I think there's this kind of need for patient capital to go into agriculture. But by the way, I think it's important to understand that agriculture is globally subsidized. In most developed economies, agriculture is subsidized. So if you want to develop agriculture, we need to understand from an African perspective that infrastructure is not what businesses like ours are able to do themselves or provide some kind of patient capital for reproduction. We need to have cheaper capital. You can't do typical 30% lending in a year and expect agriculture to develop. We need more one-digit credit, for example. So there's a need to have a kind of patient capital, to have this kind of institutional funding, partnership, global partnership to develop infrastructure. So I think those are very important for us. Too, like Folu said, we also work with a lot of DFIs for all our value chain development, while we only use commercial funding just for the trade perspective. So when it comes to developing, we run, for example, our sustainable agriculture programs, supporting farmers transition to more sustainable programs, training of farmers and all of that. So what we try to do is to use DFI funding. Now, when it comes to the commodity trading perspective, then we can use commercial funding, right? So that makes it a little bit more complex, but also a little bit easy for us as a business to stay in business. But we want to use commercial funding for value chain development, then of course you're going to run into debt and also into problems. So this is because of the cost of money. So if you can get the cost of money to be a little bit more affordable, and also get infrastructure developed by partners, then that's become very easy. Then also collaborations, I think partnership, right? So that's also very important to do. If you don't have that in perspective, and that's why we went into providing APIs for startups to sell their commodities through our platform. This is part of the collaboration and partnership, right? So we focus on the marketing side of things, while others focus on the production side of things.
All right, so we do have a question here before I go over to you from Ethiopia, Ababa. Sorry, probably didn't get that quite right, but he or she has a question regarding the significant financial strains that hinder growth and empowerment of startups, and particularly in agricultural mechanization. Folu, that seems like that's a question designed for you. So why don't you, if you want to just briefly provide that some response related to financial constraints. I know we've talked about it a bit already.
Yeah, maybe just some context that some folks might not know. If you take the same tractor, the exact same tractor specs sold in a place like Kenya, and look for it in a place like India. In India, it's 30 to 50% less costly. The very same machine. You see the same thing happen, in the West as well. So not only is, as Jerry was mentioning, not only is the cost of capital high, the cost of inputs is also higher than in other places, and that's partly due to the lack of subsidies and markets as well. So we actually see a lot of the burden. We see that the African farmer has to carry far more burden in terms of financial risk than other farmers in the world, other smallholder farmers. So we see that play out very much day to day with our customers. How do we deal with that? Well, work with our forms of financing so that we can lower. It's still not going to be as low as we would like, but for our pay-as-you-go asset financing program, for example, we have commercial financing linked with equity, merged with some zero interest debts, and other types of funding as well. The on-lending to customers can be as low as possible with other solutions, right? So we don't have a standalone finance product, but it's well integrated with our marketplace, with our hubs network, which provides inputs and servicing and maintenance and spare parts. So it's kind of a full solution and path that we think is suitable to go to get kind of affordable inputs we have to deal with the global trend of things, right? Inputs all over, even the war in Ukraine affected the prices in Africa, right? So we feel the effect. Unfortunately, there's not as much of a cushion, that's provided by those that you would expect to provide it in these markets, like you have in other markets. So creative in really bringing together partners and different sources of funding to lower that risk to our customers.
So, and we are getting some other comments in here. Jerry, could you just briefly respond to David Mbatia? I'm not sure where David's from. He wants to know what's the rate of uptake for different technologies and smart agriculture solutions in the African market. Is there really Folu, you mentioned traction, being a tractor guy, but Jerry, maybe you could talk a little bit about how well or how effective the uptake and adoption of technology is actually in Africa these days.
Yes, I can hear you. So I think it's interesting because it's also to understand Africa. One of the things we've seen is if you are trying to push the smallholders themselves to adapt to technology, that might be a tough call. So what we've done in our own case is to work with the cooperative, organize them in groups for them to have some few amongst them who are able to use technology and now adapt it, or rather implement it to them, right? So if you are looking at the adaptation of technology in Africa by smallholder farmers themselves, that might be a tough call at the moment. What has worked for successful companies that we've seen good ourselves is using extension officers or using cooperative leaders who are a little bit savvy, who are able to use technology, and who are able to adapt technology to them. So in our own mobile apps, we don't expect smallholder farmers to use it themselves. What we've done for them in Nigeria is to use a USSD code where they can actually dial and also get some information. But when it comes to use of the technology itself, we rely more on the cooperative itself and also extension officers to administer the technology on farmers. So it's all about targeting. If you understand very well who the customers are, and then the smallholder farmers or the cooperative leaders and all of that, that will give you an idea to look at who you're building for and who you're targeting. So that customer segmentation needs to be properly done. So Africa is a little bit way early to expect the farmers to use technology fully like we have in maybe Western countries.
Right. So just one other comment on this from the audience. Philip, who's from Ghana, and I believe he works with David, who just answered a question, said that they've been doing some research on the extent of digital agriculture uptake in Ghana. And they're saying, unfortunately, that the uptake so far they're finding is fairly, I think they use the word unimpressive. It's not everybody, not every country and not every farmer or groups of farmers can adopt this kind of technology when there are so many other things they need. Yeah, like Tom, maybe you could talk about just irrigation and, your technology and just, is that the kind of, technology that farmers really, really need?
Yeah, maybe the just to answer the first question on adoption. So I think maybe this figure is from a couple of years ago, but I guess it still be relevant. I think 4% of the land that is suitable for irrigation is irrigated across the continent, which is shockingly low, and I think it's a big part on a big factor in explaining the yield gap that exists across the continent when it comes to agricultural production. So I think when you talk about AgTech, it's like in how we work, it becomes a bit convoluted, right? Because we need the technology to support the new business models that we're rolling out, whether it is like remote monitoring because we sell on a pay-as-you-go basis, or whether it's developing our own credit scoring mechanisms to make sure we can finance at the cost we want to do. So I think it's good that AgTech has been drawn broader, because sometimes it's very narrowly defined as a digital first solution, which I think, in absence of proper irrigation equipment, proper inputs, proper mechanization, those things are not as impactful without having the foundation in place. So I think you're right in that light.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think one of the themes is that there's a lot of low technology things that I'm interested in, like fertilizer, but irrigation, Flu, some of the systems of solutions that you're operating in, such as cooperatives, have been around a long time. But there's the role that the high technology, the ag tech, can play and make it easier for farmers to get access to that lower technology. And I mean, fertilizer hasn't changed a lot in the 60 years that it's been really around, but there's still a lot of things that could be done with fertilizer, with water, with basic seed technology as well. So maybe I'll switch over to Yuri. Maybe, in terms of the software that is kind of the backbone, a lot of these high technology solutions, where can that take entrepreneurs like Flu, Tom, and Jerry in developing their business models and their success?
And that's a great question. And actually, Jerry and Tom, they mentioned something very interesting. Even though it's hard to adopt technology for some of the smallholder farmers in Africa, they're not that tech savvy, etc., you still can utilize simple technologies like USSD or anything else to connect with them. And I'm a strong believer that instead of just trying to educate people and force them to use something they don't know how to use and don't want to use, you should utilize technologies that are available for them and use it as a bridge to some high-end stuff like yield prediction, remote monitoring, etc. A very simple example: WhatsApp as a messenger is super popular in all over Africa. And I've seen a lot of companies utilizing WhatsApp platform to connect with smallholder farmers to provide them with insights, education, even sell inputs to farmers through the WhatsApp. And it goes to very simple protocols like USSD, or it comes with like a payment opportunities through M-Pesa, digital money in Africa. So there are a lot of ways I think AgTech companies in Africa can connect with their end clients through kind of intermediary low-level tech.
Right. Well, I think one thing that I've seen recently, in Canada's reimagining its commercial place in the world, given a lot of the changes that are occurring in the United States. And I think there is discussion about, why Canada isn't as engaged commercially, not from a development point of view, but doing business in Africa. And I think there's a lot of sense that I get from people I talk to in Africa that there's less interest in sort of traditional development, financing and projects, and more in finding ways to de-risk and encourage businesses in Canada and other regions to invest, to export, and to import, because trade has to be a two-way street. And so, I think there are some positive things that, have a great potential for Africa. One thing I'd like to ask, we talked about some of the constraints in terms of infrastructure, financing, the risk of business in Africa. But one thing I believe, having spent some time there, is that the youth of Africa, in terms of their increasing educational attainment and their entrepreneurial spirit, is a real opportunity. Africa is the youngest continent in the world, and that those people are very, very interested in doing business in Africa and around the world. What's your view of the talent that Africa has, And are there gaps that need to be filled? Maybe we'll start with you, Folu, I think.
Thanks. And actually, one of my favorite topics is talent. I think, we talk a lot about youth in Africa and kind of, Africa's youngest market. And so there's opportunities there. I think also in our space in agriculture, and we look at youth fleeing rural environments and trying to get as far away from agriculture as possible. It's kind of the confluence of the two, where one, a pretty young market, but I'm excited about agriculture is when all you see is kind of, or all you remember is your parents kind of backbreaking, or your grandparents with a hoe and doing the work in the heat. But I do think that the talent in some cases raw, but it's there. One of the things that I'm most proud of is that our core product, even the core products that we continue to build, are built by not just Africans on the continent, but people in the communities that we serve, that know the customer, not just because they've gone and interviewed, but because they've been that customer before, and some of them currently are. So I think the talent is there. Really, there's some opportunities for learning and development. The folks that we have, sure, it's the same at Zowasel and SunCulture, but the folks that we have are typically super eager to learn and to grow in their skill sets. And I think it's a real opportunity to pool and the hunger and the curiosity to learn within that talent pool. So that's something that I'm excited about in the markets where we operate in.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the real strengths Africa has. Jerry, or could you maybe, how do you see that in terms of, obviously technology requires, some pretty important skills. How is Africa placed to produce that kind of talent?
Yes, thanks. Thank you very much. So, like we all know, Africa is the youngest continent. So that translates to lots of talents. And interestingly, a lot of them are digital native. We have young people who are very digital savvy now, who are very much interested in entrepreneurship, doing their own business, doing their own bosses and all of that. But what we've seen also is not, it hasn't translated into agriculture, just like Folu mentioned. A lot of young people see agriculture as for the older people, for the poorer people, for remote communities. They want to live remote communities, coming over to the big cities and all of that. So I think we've seen that, but there's also a trend now that we're seeing, which is interesting in Nigeria, with all the rise in commodity demand and all the rise in the prices and inflation. And also, even exchange, we've seen a lot of younger people in the cities, particularly in banking, leaving banking and going into agriculture. This is interesting to us as a company. We see a lot of people who sit at the other side of the table also crossing over to go into commodity business, commodity trading, commodity aggregation, some trying to go into farming themselves now. So there's that, having that age of people beginning to understand that I could actually try farming. I could also want to do this to see what is going on. People are a little more educated now, able to deploy more resources, more talent to do a lot of work for them coming into the space. So that's very interesting to see. It's still early days, but we've seen growth in that. We call them emerging farmers who can do maybe 5 hectares of work. So we see signs, early day signs of maybe lack of a lot of maybe jobs, or maybe with digital nomads now people can work anywhere. Maybe that is also becoming an incentive for them to go into smaller cities and set up their small business. So it's an interesting time for us. We see monitoring the space to see how that evolves in the coming years.
Yeah. I think one thing that's important for Africa is to create opportunities and jobs, attractive jobs in rural areas, so that there can be a smooth transition as the smallholder community changes and adapts to a more commercial world. Tom, what do you think?
I mean, I've been welcomed as a guest for 8 years now. So what brought me here is like the entrepreneurial spirit, as well as the resilience and creativity to overcome everything. What I do when you said gaps, Clyde, in terms of knowledge. So because the continent is quite financially constrained, so any deep R&D is very difficult to do. So think digital solutions that will really leapfrog agriculture. And you mentioned like digital to support the low tech solutions. And I think the international research community could step in more when it comes to making sure that those solutions are suitable for the continent as well. So thinking about like soil spectral analysis through satellite imagery, making sure that that's suitable for the size of the farms that we have on the continent here as well. That's an extra step. It's an expensive step, but I think when it comes to knowledge, I think being the youngest and maybe the most hungry continent will not solve for the amount of time and money that's necessary to do the deep R&D. And I think that if Africa will be that sort of that leapfrog environment for more sustainable agriculture, more sort of soil quality as a foundation for sustainable agriculture, I think there's a lot more R&D that can be made more suitable for the operating environment that we have in here. But I mean, like on the continent itself, when it comes to solving problems, the hunger to succeed and the creativity and innovation that come with it, like it's there. But I think the international academic community can do a bit more to make their solutions suitable for the continent.
Yeah, I think so. Yuri, talent. I mean, you have a lot of very bright people working for your company in Ukraine. Do you have any thoughts about Africa and what can be done to foster, more talent and more opportunities for talent in this space in Africa?
Well, it's an interesting question, and we definitely have a lot of talented people here in Ukraine and in Cultivate. But essentially, what we've seen so far is that a lot of like young people in their 20s and 30s, they've come through formal education in Africa through universities, and then through some sort of, right now I'm talking about technical talent, so software developer, stuff like that. And they come through different courses from Windows and other big players on the market, and they are as good as you can get in Eastern Europe. It's just a matter of having a very specific skill set, and that is something Tal mentioned about. If you want to do a deep R&D, my personal belief, you can do it locally. In Africa, you just need to spend some time building a core team to get it done. But I guess talent, it's one piece of the equation. You need to also have certain market conditions to grow, and I guess that is something we've discussed for the past 50 minutes quite well.
Yeah. Well, look, I think this has been a great conversation. I think there's a tremendous amount of other things we could talk about, but we are coming up to the end of our time. At the close of our sessions, we normally ask everyone to give us what we call a bit of a hot take, something that each of you feel is important for our audience to know about where AgTech in Africa is going to go. So maybe Folu, do you have a final thought and perhaps a hot take on AgTech in Africa?
I don't know if I just have one, but at Hello Tractor, one of our big. Okay, thanks. One of our big bets is that Africa will be the next breadbasket to the world. we believe that, well, we don't believe, data shows that Africa has the cultivatable land, the arable land, to do that. We've got some examples of countries that have been close to achieving that, at least breadbasket status. And so, and we've got examples around the world of what it actually takes. So I think innovations in digitization and AgTech is one of them, but we've also touched on a lot of the other factors. One of the things that we didn't really have time to do is kind of dig into the role of AI and some of those emerging technologies and how we can leverage them for food production and food security in Africa. So I guess my big bet or my hot take is that get ready for the next breadbasket world.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So, Jerry, what's your closing hot take about AgTech in Africa?
When people say Africa is the future, I think that's going to say the market, how big the market is. So for us at Zowasel, we want to focus around innovation around technology, trade alternative finance for trade, and also providing guarantee market within the continent and also out of the continent, so that farmers within the cooperative can form their have a base for them to trade commodity directly with the big corporates for them to earn more for their crop. So our focus is around technology finance and markets. I'm going to push that across the continent aggressively across the world.
All right. Well, thanks. And then, so I guess that takes us, Tom, to you. Where do you stand? I mean, I think we just want your hot take. What do you think is the next big thing in Africa?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Folu was saying in terms of the optimism as well. I'm not sure if it's like, because we're an energy company as well, next to being an agricultural company. So I think when it comes to being the next big supplier of renewable energy, I think the continent has a lot of opportunity as well. I think when it comes to running a carbon deficit, I think Africa is the first continent that will be able to do that. I think when it comes to the solar potential, hydro potential, as well as geothermal potential, Africa has a lot of things going for it. So maybe like to echo Folu, I think not only the next bread basket, but maybe the next energy basket as well when it comes to renewable energy.
All right. Well, that's great. Obviously, irrigation, mechanization, farm systems are all critical components of that. And look, I think that Africa is going to become an important exporter of food. And that is going to be really important for Africa's economic development, to get the GDP in many countries up to a point where people can have good food security, hospitals, schools, all the things that are important. Yuri, you've been listening closely, and I'd be interested in your hot take from the discussion today.
Yeah, I wanna kind of have my hot take around a statistic I have found, and it's very interesting statistic provided by Ag Founder. So Ag Marketplace and Ag FinTech are the most popular category when it comes to investment in agri-food technology in Africa in 2024. So my hot take would be, we need to look at some of the startups or scale-ups in Africa that are in Ag Marketplace or Ag FinTech space, and see how they get invested or how they will grow in 2025. And that's actually one of the topics we should bring in our future episodes regarding investments, climate for AgTech companies in Africa. I think it's very interesting topic as well to talk to in the future.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a critically important thing. I think we need, but I think some of the other topics we talked about today in terms of infrastructure, I think some of the audience may have seen we've had some challenges in terms of the internet, and meeting that challenge with better connectivity. And it's not perfect in Canada either, and we're supposedly a developed country, so we need to really have that infrastructure everywhere around the world to make AgTech really go. So thanks very much to all our guests today for joining us. I think it's been one of our best episodes. This was episode number 7, and we'll have some information for you in the near future about episode 8. So I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the audience for your participation today. If you have other comments or information, we'll be going through our LinkedIn site. Feel free, and we can keep the conversation going online. So from Ottawa, Canada, where I am today, and to our guests in Africa, and Yuri, of course, in Lviv in Ukraine, have a great day. Have a great day to all our listeners and viewers around the globe. And we'll see you next month in March for Digital Ag Global. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.